and I told you so. I'm a kid in the candy store with the leather on the denim. I ain't the cure, I'm the venom. If you wanna find me, find the taillight. Something's coming in, you're gonna wanna take a red eye. It's time to go.
Good afternoon to all of you listening out there and watching on your live stream. This is Paglinawan, ang Maestro, with episode 107, which we today will celebrate with the title Bongbong Speaks Part 1. And today he speaks on agriculture and foreign policy. We will have the candidate Bongbong Marcos, when he was still the vice president, talk about his plans running for the 2022 elections. And in order to probe how candidate Marcos Jr. analyzes a problem, I threw him a question on crop insurance. But here he is with his greetings.
Magandang umaga, Kaana. Magandang umaga, Kamentong and Kaado and lahat ng sumusubaybay sa ating programa. Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat.
In this particular show, and you will hear a lot. You will hear a lot from Bongbong Marcos as Bongbong speaks. And as I was saying, to determine his level of understanding of issues, I gave him a question pertaining crop insurance. And here is his answer on the question, agriculture or financial management issue. Here is Bongbong Marcos on agriculture.
Mr. Senator, considering po that the countryside is the majority of our population, at isa pong usapin is the seeming difficulty balancing agricultural imports with farmers' production. Ito po yung significant in rice and coconuts that constitute the majority of our farming communities. Sa standard question, ano po ang thoughts ninyo, Mr. Senator, for instance, dito sa napipending issue ng crop insurance is one area in contention for the slack in production. Sangayon po ba kayo sa paglipat ng Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation mula sa Department of Agriculture papunta sa Department of Finance?
Actually, hindi ko maintindihan kung bakit lilipat from DA ilalagay sa Department of Finance. I do not think that even the experts in the Department of Finance know where are the most hard-hit areas, what are the different crops that are being grown in those areas, what are the levels of insurance that the farmers needs, and how much is the level of insurance that the LGUs can afford to give to their constituent farmers. Kaya it's a trend that I see that the Department of Finance seems to be putting under its own wing all of the profit centers, all of the profit streams, all of the fund streams, all that the government has. Dapat pinapailalim lahat sa DOF. Whereas if you look at it, the Philippine Crop Insurance, PCIC is clearly, it is a crop insurance program. It belongs under the Department of Agriculture. And it is the Department of Agriculture who can determine the kind of insurance levels that people require, because they have information from many years about the weather, about the disasters that come, the drought, kung yung napeste yung lugar na yun, if they need a special coverage, All of these things are not to be determined by financiers. It's determined by agronomists and agriculturists and the people who are actually on the ground. As to the importation that you mentioned, this the balance between the importation and the local supply. I think that what the government has done is that it is using importation as the way to control prices of agricultural commodities, and it has succeeded in that. Because we just get as much as possible. We just get the cheapest that we can import. We get what we can from the local sources, and we get the cheapest that we can just to keep the prices down. However, that does nothing for the agricultural sector of the country, because we are encouraging importation. We are not doing anything to help develop the actual agricultural economy locally.
Which leads me to my follow-up question from Maximo Villoronte of Nueva Ecija po. Towards self-sufficiency, sangayon po ba kayo na subsidize ang agriculture natin para maging competitive ang ating mga magsasaka? Kasi po ngayon, yung mga binhit, ibang agricultural inputs ay subsidize lang na ating gobyerno. At even in the financial aspect, yung po 25% loan window ng agri-agro law, hindi naman napapatupad dahil binigyan ng opsyon ng mga bangko na mag-divert. Ano po ang inyong pananaw dito?
Well, precisely yan. Hindi naman lahat ng mga measures na yan ay hindi nakakatulong yan sa mga magsasaka ng Pilipino. Ay baliktad ang ating approach. Ay tinitignan lang natin yung supply. We also have to look at the production side. Sa production side, wala tayong ginagawa. Wala tayong there are no facilities for production loans. Even Land Bank, which is supposed to be an agricultural bank, behaves like a commercial bank, and no longer has special products, as the bankers call it, for the farmers and the farmer groups. So yung research natin, we had that much vaunted ERI in UPLB before, where we were producing or we were developing strains that were particularly good for the Filipino condition. So that we've removed that capability, although it still exists. Hindi naman talaga napopondohan, hindi naman talaga nagagamit. Yung ating mechanization is very clear. Tignan lang natin. If you want to lower the price of palay, if you want to lower the price of rice dito sa Pilipinas, ayusin niyo yung mechanization. Because kung titignan natin, yung mga kakompetensya natin, Thailand, Vietnam, ang percentage ng labor cost, the actual total price of the product, ang kanilang percentage of labor cost, I think it's about 6%, tayo mga 12%. So we are double. We spend double on labor costs, hence increasing the prices of our products. Kung mag-mechanize tayo at magiging mas extensive ang ating agricultural system, extensive in the sense na hindi maliliit lang na tiga kalahating hektarya dito, 1/3 hectare there, kailangan gagawin natin through the cooperatives. My idea is through the cooperatives is we develop their capabilities. We do research to help. Meron na tayong climate change, something we didn't really have to deal with before. But we develop new strains, new varieties that will be more robust in the face of all of these changes. We have to develop the production side. We have to provide production loans. We have to buy pesticides and fertilizer at in bulk prices para mabigay natin sa mga farmer na mura. And then on the other side, on the processing side, kulang tayo sa milling, kulang tayo sa dryer, kulang tayo sa tractor, kulang tayo sa lahat ng so that the value added stays with the farmer. Hindi napupunta sa trader lang. Kaya yun ang and then on the supply side, on the supply end, on the retail end, we have to have a more efficient supply chain coming from the farm to the actual market, to the retail, to the consumer. Kailangan patibayin natin yan. We had that before. We had the research and development in UPLB, various various agencies there. We had the development, we had the production loans that were being given. Remember, Masagana 99. We had come out of 2 very bad droughts. That's why Masagana 99 was instituted, and we were able to increase our production to 99. That's why Masagana 99 bags per hectare. Ang baba pa nun, considering that's really very low. Now we are doing 300 bags per hectare, but this is private. These are private
Farms.
firms. Hindi ito sa public. We are averaging in the Philippines. Ang sabi nila, magsi-6 tons per hectare daw tayo, pero ang pagkalam ko, mga 4.6 lang ang ating 4.6 tons lang. Whereas China, they have areas that they're doing 10-12 tons per hectare. Why? Because their variety is perfectly suited doon sa lupa nila, doon sa weather nila, doon sa mechanization nila, and talagang they have invested a great deal in all of the requirements so that our agricultural sector will improve. Hindi natin nagawa, napabayaan natin na matagal, and that's why we now have to resort to importation. But the rice tarification law is supposed to return the money that is collected on the rice tarification to the farmers. But when you do the calculations, sinasabi na 10 billion a year. 10 billion a year sa Region 1 pa lang, kulang na yun eh. So we don't know how that is supposed to go down. I think we need to suspend this dependence on importation and start developing the production side. It's all right to keep, it is a good goal to keep the prices low. So maybe we have to make that what you were just mentioning, the mix, the balance between importations and developing production. But I think in the long term, we should see importation merely as a short term because we are in emergency, we're in a crisis situation. But in the long term, I think it is absolutely necessary for such a large part of our economy, a large part of our population that is still involved in agriculture, that we develop agriculture properly. And we always talk about rice and corn, palay, we talk about bigas at saka mais. Pero kasama na rin dapat dyan yung mga high value crops, yung mga para naman mas malaki ang kinikita ng ating mga farmer. But again, we will have to teach them. Kailangan mag-techno-demo, kailangan mag-research ulit na ano yung mga strains na bagay dito sa iba't ibang lugar. All of these things the government has to do. Then of course, the number one issue for agriculture, patubig. Talagang balikan natin yung ano natin, yung irrigation systems natin at nasisira na sila, yung mga labya, luma na, maliit na masyado. And we should stop already charging farmers for using the irrigation canals of the government. That's not the intention of the irrigation systems. Ginagawa ng gobyerno yan
That creates another emergency.
Oo nga, dahil hindi ko naman dahil wala naman yun noon nung pinag-aaralan namin sa Senado yan. Ang gulat ko na nasa receivable ng irrigation, sinasabi lang meron kaming receivable, kaya maganda yung libro namin because may receivable kami from the farmers na 12 billion pesos. This is about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Sabi ko, bakit pa kayo mag-charge? Saan kukuha ng 12 billion ng mga farmer? But yung pag ginagawa yun, wala talagang mangyayari dun sa account na yun, sa item na yan. Kaya we have to really rethink the whole system. Napabayaan lang just allow it to deteriorate.
There you go. The most prepared candidate for the 2022 elections. And clearly he was capable of contextual analysis. He correctly read what the finance was doing to put all the funding streams under its wings, ostensibly prompted by the term insurance, which is a financial discipline. However, Where are the most hardly hit areas? What are the different crops grown in those areas? What are the levels of insurance the farmers need? And what can the LGUs provide? And he qualified that it is the Agriculture Department that has the stock knowledge and history of disasters, episodes of drought, nuances of infestations on one hand, and whatever appropriate and specific insurance coverage the farmer need. The solution is not for finance, but to be determined by agronomists, agriculturists, and the people on the ground. This comes very much, this information provided to us comes from a very knowledgeable person insofar as the micro requirements of agriculture is concerned. He also properly placed importation as a balancing act to control the prices of commodities in the market. But he said this supply solution does not really help the farmer and should only be used as a stopgap measure. He mentioned that we must help the farmer grow an agricultural economy through production, the availability of loans, money, seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, good irrigation, and mechanization, from tilling the soil to planting to harvesting and post-harvest processing. And he even provided additional insights that our input factor is very high at 12%, while Vietnam has 6% in terms of rice production. And in terms of output, that China produces an average of up to 10 tons per hectare, 10 tons per hectare, while we only do up to 6 tons per hectare. If I may add here, we should also be aware of the decrepit condition of the coconut industry because our trees only average 40 fruits a year, while that of India is about 200 and that of Indonesia is about 120. And of course, high-value crops, not just the grains, the rice and corn, because the high-value crops give the farmers higher returns. And he said, we have to have an effective supply chain. We must rethink and modernize the whole system. This is a very intelligent, almost an analysis of an expert, a theoretical expert. And we must weigh this, however, problem, within the context of what happened from 1986 to 2016. 30 years of what I call the EDSA revolution. 30 years given to the EDSA revolution to prove that a change in paradigm for the better really awaits our people. You know, ladies and gentlemen, up to 1985, Marcos Sr. was heading the country from an agriculture towards industrialization. After being deposed in 1986, the Americans, however, diverted our priorities and manipulated our economy to be dependent on the G7 industrialized countries and their clients to serve as our factory. Tinameme po, inapakan po, dinaganan, ang ating industrialization plan, no? And replace this with a liberal economy of privatization, liberalization and deregulation, and globalization through importation. That's what I mean when the industrialized countries became our factory instead of we putting up our own industrial economy. Our transition went immediately from agriculture to a service economy. From agriculture, dapat dadaan po yan ng industrialization. Because yung puhunan sa lupa ng mga feudalists ay kailangan i-convert into industries para magkaroon tayo ng industrial revolution. Because habang dumadami po ang population, dumadami ang nangangailangan ng trabaho. And then, ang natural progression niya, yung industrialization, as it brings it together with it, the agro economy. And that's why Marcos Sr. was always talking about a balanced agro-industrial growth. Dahil pag tumaas na huyan, magre-require huyan ng additional services. And so, our agriculture on the left and the service economy on the right supports the industrialization towards becoming a first world country. Pero hindi. Dumiretso po tayo doon sa industrialization. We did not pass industrialization. I wish to correct myself. We went to a service economy. To serve. At ngayon, ano nangyayari? We are a country of overseas Filipino workers. Why? Because we serve the white and blue-collar jobs of the rich nations. Yan mga kabansa ang irony. No? Kaya ako'y nag-print ng libro. No? I printed this book, The Poverty of Power. Yung 30 years na inaasahan natin mga kabansa na magkakaroon tayo ng paradigm towards a developing country, third world pa nga tawag no, developing into first world country. Pero hindi nangyari. Bakit? Because those who were in dispensation of power, wasted that power. Wasted that power. And dito sa pinag-uusapan natin, mga kabansa, which was described at length in this book, no? Kung ano, bakit nagkulang? Ano yung mga pinigilan ng mga Amerikano? Eto, mga kabansa, squander of our water resources. God-given rainwater is adequately not harnessed in the mountains through adequate dams. Hanggang ngayon, ilang taon na ho yan? More than a decade na. Halos 20 years na. Pinag-uusapan niyang modernization ng mga dams natin. And if we look into the development plans, panahon ni Marcos, he was already talking about the Laiban Dam. And yung nasa kaliwa niya, ang tawag Kaliwa Dam. Panahon lang ho ni Duterte na buhay ang project na yan. Dahil nga nagkakaroon na po, nagagahol na tayo sa tubig. Kung titingnan niyo po mula sa kanluran, nandiyan ang Zambales Ranges. The northwest, no? Sa hilagang kanluran, nandiyan ang Cordillera. At sa norte, nandiyan ang Caraballo. At yan very, very pertinent ngayon dahil yan ho ang binagsakan ng Typhoon Egay. No? Sobra-sobra tubig ho nilagay ng Typhoon Egay dyan. Tapos sa bandang silangan, nandiyan naman ang Sierra Madre Mountains. So balot ng bundok mula kaliwa hanggang kanan ang ating talukab, ika nga. No? At dito sa kanyang pinaka-bosom, nandyan ang Central Plains of Luzon. No? Pero ano ho nangyayari? Naiipon ng tubig sa taas, kulang ang dam, marami nakakalusot, at kung kailangan pakawalan ng tubig mula dyan sa taasan, when it is unleashed, it is, they flow unabated directly sa Manila Bay o sa Pacific Ocean, no? Denying the Luzon population northwest of Mega Manila valuable drinking and irrigation supply. Yun po yung sinasabi ni candidate Marcos na patubig, no? At ngayon, nararamdaman natin, dahil nagraras sila ng tubig, kakulangan. Ito po ay inimbark ni Marcos Sr. na parte ng kanyang flood control program in order to attempt to harness this natural wealth of water. But Corazon Aquino, doon sa bandang Silangan, dahil po sa bandang Silangan mula Sierra Madre, bumabagsak po ang tubig sa Marikina at Pasig River papunta, ang impounding system ay nandyan sa Laguna de Bay. Pero pag bumaha na sa Manila Bay, sa Laguna de Bay, wala na hong labasan ng tubig papuntang Laguna de Bay. Bakit ho? Dahil hindi ho itinuloy ni Corazon Aquino ang Parañaque Spillway. Yung po yun sa bandang Sukat, magkakaroon sana ng isang underground canal kung saan pag umaapaw na ang Laguna de Bay ay ibobomba palabas sa Manila Bay ang sobrang tubig. Dito naman sa bandang Kanluran, wala. Pagbagsak ng tubig, yan ay dadaloy sa pinakamalaking pagdaloy niyan dito sa Pampanga River, no? Yan ho ang sumasalo. At dito naman sa bandang Silangan, ibabato ng Sierra Madre papuntang Kanluran sa Tulyahan River, magkikita ho sa gitna yan, parteng Pampanga, Bulacan at Nueva Ecija sa tinatawag na Candaba Swamp. Bakit laging may tubig sa Candaba Swamp pero hindi naman natin nagagamit? Dahil pag dumating na dyan ng tubig, lalabas na ho yan sa karagatan, mga kabansa. Meron tayong sasabihin dyan na proposal later on. Bukod dito, sinabutahe rin ng 30 years of Aquino the Mother to Aquino the Son ang ating energy resources, mga kabansa. Ninationalize ni Marcos Sr. ang energy sector hindi lamang para i-conserve ang foreign currency natin sa pambili ng imported fuel, no? But to lower the cost of electricity to power 11 industries on the road to our full industrialization. Yun yung sinasabi kong na laktawan. Bakit po? Dahil hindi din po pinatakbo, minotbol din ni Corazon Aquino ang Bataan Nuclear Plant, at kung ito ay hindi na motbol, ang dependence po natin sa imported fuel will sink down to as low as 34%, maybe even lower. Today, as we speak, bumalik tayo sa 97% dependence on imported fuel. Hindi ba yan napakalaking kalokohan? Kapabayaan ang sabi ng kandidatong Marcos para maging Pangulo. Napabayaan natin, hindi ho lamang napabayaan natin. Naghari po mga ganid, kasakiman ng mga oligarko, mga naghaharing uri, at yung may mga vested interest para makuha nila ang kontrol ng mga industriya ngayon. Patubig at para sa kuryente. Para sila ang yumaman sa itaas habang ang nagsasubsidiya ng kanilang kayamanan ay ang karamihan ng populasyon dito sa baba. Ano ang responde ni Marcos Jr. dyan sa kanyang zona? meron siyang pinopropose na Department of Water Resources. At dito po, ipinopropose ko na panahon pa ni Presidente Duterte ang inclusion of a very important shortstop sa pagitan ng karagatan at kabundukan, kung saan mag-iimbak tayo ng tubig mula sa silangan hanggang kanluran para budburan ng inumin ng mga tao at patubig sa ating mga tanim. Yan po ang Candaba impounding system. Sinabi rin po ni Bongbong Marcos, President Marcos, sa kanyang SONA, reform of our fisheries code towards the development of a blue economy. Ano ibig sabihin ng blue economy? Yung pong about fisheries. Aayusin ang fisheries code. And I propose going all the way from a bureau to a full department. Kailangan ialis ang fisheries sa agriculture para magkaroon ng isang ahensya na may zero corruption and that will be developed just like the water resources from zero-based. Yamang magiging model natin. Dahil po talamak na ang korupsyon dyan sa director, sa regional director level ng agriculture. Kailangan ho yan, alisin ang fisheries dyan. At bigyan ng kaukulang pansin mismo ang agriculture separate from fisheries. Isauli ang municipal waters natin sa pagtatapos, hindi 10 to 15 kilometers from the shore. Kasi iba-iba ho ang configuration ng lalim ng tubig. Kundi 7.5 fathoms ang dapat maging gabay kung saan magsisimula ang open sea, open fishings from the municipal fishing grounds. Yan. Expansion of our deep sea fishing capability. Alam nyo ba ang ating fishing industry ay nakasalalay lamang sa mga basnig. Ang basnig ho, pag lumabas ng mga hapon, kailangan bumalik kinabukasan dahil wala na po siya yelo. Tunaw na yung yelo dala niya. Hindi katulad ng mga malalaking fishing vessels ng China na nakalalayag up to 5 days in open deep sea. At siya ay may sariling refrigeration system. Yan po. And finally, the expansion of fishing port facilities through an empowered Philippine Port Authority. Hindi katulad niya ang korap na nakaupo dyan ngayon. Especially sa nilalagay yung mga fish ports. Dyan po, pagbaba nyo ng Cagayan, bababa na po yan sa kanan, sa Pacific Ocean. Bababa na yan ng Quezon, bababa na yan ng Bicol, bababa na yan. At yan ay nakaharap sa Benham Rice where it's our exclusive economic zone. At bababa po yan sa Caraga, liliko po pakaliwa, no? Papunta sa Celebes Sea, kung saan dadaanan ng Cotabato at yung mga Misamis area at yung Zamboanga hanggang makarating ng Sulu Archipelago. Bakit po dyan dapat ang priority? Dahil nandyan po ang poorest of the poor Filipinos who are fisher folk. Dahil sa inverted L na yan, nandyan, nakaharap sa Pacific Ocean at nakaharap sa Celebes Sea. At ang revolutionary input ko po, allow the government to assume a bigger control of facilities, of utilities, lowering costs to the consumer, mga kabansa, in the process of abolishing the IPIRA law and converting consumer refunds exceeding 3 trillion. Alam nyo ba ang refundable ng mga independent power producers, mga kabansa, sa consumers nila? Ang Meralco lang po nasa 300 billion na. Pero the entire industry, 3 trillion. Ito ay gawing seeding government equity. Lowering costs for consumers and enhancing location by foreign investors and the rebirth of the medium and small industries all over the country for those people who cannot land jobs. They will have a livelihood waiting for them. So much mga kabansa, so much for agriculture. We now go into foreign policy and let us listen to Bongbong Marcos.
Senator BBM, unang-unang tanong ko po is all about independent foreign policy. As you know, ang direksyon po ng ating Pangulong Duterte is independent foreign policy. Ano po ang masasabi niyo dito? Tama po ba ang tinatahak ng ating Pangulo at ng ating current administration given the changing geopolitical configuration in the Indo-Pacific region with the rise of China and of course with the pivot to Asia policy of the US? Ang susunod ko pong tanong mamaya po.
Well, yeah, definitely. I think we have, because we still sometimes have this hangover of the Cold War, where we talk about spheres of influence, where we are influenced by the Soviet Union or by the United States. Saan tayo pumapanig? We were very clearly with the United States because they fought a war with us against during the Second World War. And so that cemented a very close relationship. So in that scenario, in the Cold War context, we were very much allied. May basis pa nga tayo dito sa Pilipinas. But I think now that model no longer applies. And the power centers no longer reside only in Moscow or in Washington, D.C. Power centers, global power centers reside in many, many other places now. In Germany, in Beijing, even Singapore, Korea, the emerging markets. That's the pivot. That's the pivot there of the United States, because the emerging markets have become so important, and the influence of China on ASEAN, on the ASEAN countries, is very large. So we happen to be really in a geopolitically strategic place. We are in a sense the gateway in and out of the Pacific for any country. That's why the United States is still going through the Philippines to work through to dominate, to try control that area. And the Chinese naman are looking to control the West Philippine Sea para yung malalaking nilang aircraft carrier at mga barko na nakastasyon sa kanila ay makalabas napunta sa Pacific to project power. So these are then Soviet Union is also flexing its muscles. Then all of the other economically important countries are also becoming more prominent in the general world market, in the general world economy. And so ang Pilipinas talagang kailangan balansyado. And we are in a very sensitive, our geography is very strategically important. So that's why we have to always remember that we have to devise our foreign policy not in consonance with the American hegemony or the Chinese ideology or the Russian business model, whatever it is. We have to model our foreign policy for the Philippines. And whenever the subject comes up, I always say, we just need to remind ourselves, I do not work for Washington, I do not work in Beijing, I work in Manila. And therefore, everything we do should be what is in the best interest of the Philippines. So this inclusive foreign, the change in our foreign policy, where it was very much focused on the United States, is now a more inclusive. Yung dinala ni President Duterte, the more inclusive is the correct reaction to the changing geopolitics that we are seeing now. The Cold War lasted almost 50 years, and it was it was stagnant. It was like that for all the time. But now things change all the time because ang dami ng players eh. Kaya kailangan we have a very thin line that we have to tread. Kaya kailangan mag-ingat tayo basta't alalahanin lang natin na halimbawa yung sa China, I know that people have been criticizing the president because softly daw ang approach niya sa China. They're doing all kinds of things. True. It's true. There are abuses that we should really be taking up with our Chinese friends. But at the same time, does not serve any purpose to say that we will buy patrol boats and we will get the fighter planes and because one day we might have to fight China. Well, you better hope that day never comes because that war will last about a day and a half. And
Yes.
we will lose it.
Yes, that's
Kalimutan na natin yun. We have to engage the Chinese. We have to continue to engage the Chinese. I like to tell this story that
Ayan, mga kabansa, no? The continuing knowledge of candidate Marcos. This interview we made in September 2021, about 6 months before the elections. At fresco po, no? Alam niya na ang Cold War tapos na. Alam niya ang Cold War tapos na. Ha? Tapos na ang Cold War. In-establish din niya that the US is a traditional ally. Oh. Mga givens po yan. No? Pero, sabi niya, with the changing world, no, we need to constructively engage with China. Ha? Yan yung constructive engagement. Bakit? Because the US po is a declining power while China is an ascending power. No? Actually, the last gasps of the US is already happening. Why? Dahil for the past 24 years, wala hong ginawa ang US kundi to spend 8 trillion US dollars in wars. Samantalang ang China was slowly building its economy into a pace that went from slow to fast to faster to fastest, that it was able to alleviate 800 million yung pong nasa lower ranks ng kanyang 1.4 million. So may upper na 600 million, yung nasa lower 800 million that was on the poverty line. But in 30 years, mga kabansa, na alleviate ng China yan, naiakyat niya, raos niya yung 800 million ng mga tao na yan. Not only over the poverty line, but to become part and parcel of a productive China. Alam niyo ang ginawa nila ron? Pareho rin tayo ng mga sitwasyon sa tubig eh. Meron sa kanila yung yung mga mountains. Ang norte kasi ng China is composed of either mountains or high deserts. Pagbagsak po niyan, ibababa ng 3 ilog. Yangtze River, Yellow River, at Mekong River. Ang tubig lagi humbaha sa China, which was the cost. Like, ito nga nararanasan natin ngayon, na laging may disaster. Ang dami namamatay, ang dami nawawala ng bahay, ang dami nawawala ng farms. So, anong ginawa ng China? Bago po lumabas, gumawa po ng network of man-made lakes and China as impounding systems. Mga kabansa, inipon ang tubig para magamit ng mga farmers niya. open engagement with ASEAN, independent foreign policy based on national interest, mga kabansa. No? So ngayon, punta tayo ngayon mga kabansa, sa application, applied foreign policy. Here is Bongbong Marcos again.
I think LC, who commented here in our thread, says BBM best bet to come in because most ready, competency, wisdom, and appears ready with targeted action plan for problems facing the country. I think our discussion is confirming that. So let's get back to the very interesting story from Senator BBM.
Okay, it's with regard when we talk of foreign policy, ngayon lang naging political issue yan sa taong bayan. It's really the first time I've seen foreign policy even being mentioned because our fishermen hinahadlangan na kaya nararamdaman na sa grassroots level. So most of the time when we talk about foreign policy or when we try to analyze the foreign policy of the Duterte government, we are talking really about their dealings with China. And that's why I think it's very important that I quickly tell this very quick story. It was a story told to me by Attorney Estelito Mendoza. Well, it happened when he was Solgen, when they were all in China signing the diplomatic agreement between China and the Philippines. Natapos na yung pirmahan, natapos na yung seremonya. He says, my father and he, Deng Xiaoping and his assistant, so apat lang sila sitting in the room, just waiting, I think, for the next event. And nagkukwentuhan, my father brought up, sabi niya, what do we do about our conflicting claims in the South China Sea? Wala pa ang West Philippine Sea nun, in the South China Sea. And he said, maybe we'll just leave it to the UN. And Deng Xiaoping immediately said, no, let's not do that, because if we send that to the UN, nothing will happen. He says, you tell us what you want, we tell you what we want, and we talk about it. And from 1975 until 2010, that was the policy with China. Kaya hindi tayo nagkakagulo na ganito because pagka may konting aberya, may konting banggaan, whatever it is, we immediately go to the Chinese and we tell them, look, hindi maganda ito. Sayang lang yung pagkakaibigan natin, ayusin natin ito. And that's why you didn't hear of any of these incursions or any of these difficulties that we're running into now. That policy changed immediately in the Aquino government and with the filing of the case against China, which of course they do not recognize. They're not signatory to the Rome agreements, etc., etc. But nonetheless, we filed it. So nag-file tayo ng kaso. Alam mo, ibang usapan yan. Kahit yung magkaibigan, pag natigil ang usapan na pare, ano ba, bakit di ba natin maayos to? At napunta sa tatawag na ako ng abogado, tapos na ang pagsasama ninyo. That you will harden your positions. Siyempre, kinakasuhan na ako nito. Lalaban na ako. And that's what's happened. That's what brought us here. And that's why we have to continue to have this policy of engagement. All of these things we can talk about. Kahit na hindi tayo mag-agree, kahit it's not the work of a day. Now we'll pick up the telephone and talk to somebody in China, tapos na yung problema na yan. Hindi. It will take a great deal of time. Because it took a long time for us to develop into this rather precarious situation. So it will also take time for us to slowly step back from that. And that will require some very deft and skilled diplomacy on the part of the Philippine government. But it is something that we need to do if we are going to rationalize this relationship that we have with China, that we have with the ASEAN, that we have with the United States, all of the global forces that are impinging upon the Philippines. Kaya hindi na tayo pwedeng we are not binary anymore, yes or no.
Yes.
Puro yan gray area na ngayon. Kaya wala nang Cold War.
Well,
I
think
couldn't.
yes, Maestro, go ahead.
Opo. I couldn't agree with I'm totally in agreement with with Senator BBM, no? At tama siya, diplomacy pa rin, bilateral relation in terms yung talks kailangan at saka yung constructive engagement. Matagal na po naming sinasabi dito sa aming programa kaming tatlo na that's the way forward. At sana yung susunod na administration has to take note of all of these things, no? Especially ng susunod na presidente natin. Yung panghuli ko pong question when you talk about foreign policy is may kinalaman po sa Visiting Forces Agreement, sa Mutual Defense Treaty, at saka yung Enhanced Defense Cooperation. What do you think about this? Do you really think po, Senator Bongbong, na we should do away with this or we should maintain this? And how this put into place given na ang daming nangyayari geopolitically speaking at saka mayroon kang dynamics din na tinatawag na balance of power at mayroon kang competition between the two superpowers right now, no? We have China, who's a powerhouse, and you have also the US, who's also a superpower in terms of military, but China is also not behind it. So ano po yung pananaw niyo po dito?
Dapat maging maliwanag ang definition ng ating treaty. Mutual Defense Treaty, sabihin natin with the United States, what does it mean? Does it mean that, in fact, I'm sure marami sa mga political observers ang nagulat when Obama came to visit the Philippines, he said flat out, the United States will not go to war for the Philippines. Sa kakalaban naman natin, may pinagsamahan, may treaty tayo na nakasulat doon. But I remember this process went on in my father's time. Nagbalik-balik yan. We had to send, I remember he insisted on a very clear statement that the Mutual Defense Agreement, Mutual Defense Treaty would say that if you go to war with the Philippines, you are going to war with the United States. The same arrangement as they have in NATO, that you go to war with one country, you go to war with the entire NATO. So this, I think, has to be revisited. We have to go through that process again, ask the Americans, okay, ano ba talaga? Talaga ba, kayo ba ilalaban para sa amin? O gusto lang ninyo magka-bases? O dapat alam naman yung constitution namin, hindi kami makapaglagay ng bases. So what does that mean? Does that mean that you're withdrawing support for us, especially when it comes to war? Let us balikan natin sila because I remember it took almost 10 years that my father going back and forth with the Americans, insisting that this be part of it. Is this part of it or is it not? And until finally we got a commitment from them. If we can get that kind of commitment, then fine. If not, then we know where we stand. Then we have to, of course, balance the American influence here in the Philippines with the other players. And when I talk about other players, hindi lang China yan. You have to deal with ASEAN. You have to deal with Japan. You have to deal with North Korea. Our region is very, very active geopolitically right now. I guess with the presence of China. But again, the Philippines, alam mo, umubol lang yung mga malalaki yan sabay-sabay, napitpit na tayo eh. So we have to be very, very careful that we don't make any mistakes and that we continue to work for the national interest. And it still comes down to engagement. Because when you lose engagement, gera na eh. And who wants that? Nobody wants that. I don't think the United States wants that. I don't think China wants that. We certainly don't want that.
There you go. Huwag po natin kalilimutan ang Estelito Mendoza story dito sa ating applied foreign policy, no? Na kung saan si Bongbong Marcos mismo ang nagsasabi kung nandun talaga sa hindi lang sa talukap ng kanyang noo, kundi sa kanyang cerebrum at oblongata, medulla oblongata. Ha? Yan po, no? Yung from 1975 when we established a relationship with China up to 2010 nung magsimula si Noynoy Aquino, wala kayong makikita na sigalot dyan na hindi na address properly. But when Noynoy Aquino started the animosities, that ended up with the filing of the arbitral proceedings versus China, diyan na nagsimula yung hardening of relations, no? And so Bongbong Marcos says we should revisit the status of our agreements with the U.S., the Mutual Defense Treaty, the Visiting Forces Agreement, and EDCA. Ito po ay dahil sa pivot to Asia na in-announce ni Barack Obama sometime in 2011. The rebalancing of U.S. military to the Asia-Pacific up to 60% in the face of a rising China as an economic and military power. Pero nung panahon na yon, when asked about the Mutual Defense Treaty, Obama said, we will not go to war with the Philippines, and emphasized that the letter of the treaty is only on municipal areas and ships and aircrafts. No? While the Secretary of State during that time, Hillary Clinton, qualified hypothetical questions in the South China Sea, hindi namin sasagutin yan. No? In a few years, in a year or two, they were started feeling that they were losing the war in Afghanistan, just as a regime change in Ukraine happened, followed by the NATO war. And up to now, this is raging on war with Russia. Yeah. And now that Russia is in the middle of a war with NATO in Ukraine, where 20 million of its people have become refugees, mga kabansa, and its major cities devastated. No? Nag-introduce ng US scenario nag-introduce ng US ng isang scenario regarding a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan. And this was just about the time when Biden, more or less, in matters of words, and I would say doublespeak, suddenly changed and assured Bongbong Marcos, now president, we have your back, man. Yan ang pangkasalukuyang problema. No? So where is the disconnect coming from? There seems to be an incoherence between what Bongbong says and what his government is doing, mga kabansa. In agriculture, in the matter of sugar importation, he railroaded a procurement process permitted by law to issue sugar orders in favor of shipments that have already arrived in the Philippines. Therefore, was actually technical smuggling. Doon sa supply naman ng onions, he bought onions at high prices from hoarders, and resold them to the market at a lower price. No? And this government action did not, however, lower the inflation of commodities in the market. But we would like to give him 80% for an attempt, but only 30% for results. His principles on foreign policy, on the other hand, appear sound. Also, just like his agricultural principles. Pero pagdating sa praxis, mga kabansa, pagdating sa praxis, mukhang may disconnect. Pagdating sa praxis, mukhang may disconnect. Well, and we will leave this as an open question. No? We were all expecting that he would continue the independent foreign policy that President Duterte had begun. But during his first year, the air suddenly became loaded with a possible animosity, not only with China, but also in contradiction to the two treaties of neutrality and non-nuclear proliferation with ASEAN. With the establishment of 4 additional American EDCA bases in exchange for a measly 83 million. But this could serve as a launching pad for war. For war, mga kabansa, with China. Yan ang problema. And not only China, and now Vietnam is arming. So, saan mapupunta yan? So, anyari, Mr. President? Well, this is part 1 of Bongbong Marcos Speaks. Ha? At nire-remind ko lang yung mga gustong bumili nung book ko on the power of poverty, where you will realize the context of a lot of what we are talking about here today. And what even our president now is talking about when he was still a candidate for the position. For those who wish to buy this, just text 0917-336-4366. Today we discuss 2 aspects of his administration in the fields of agriculture and foreign policy. Next week, yun po yung Bongbong Speaks Part 2. And in Part 2, we will tackle the Sabah claim and the economy. Kung meron pong mga nagbigay ng inyong mga messages, tingnan po natin kung maisisingit pa natin ngayon. Ayan mga kabansa, comments. Imelda Palapal, good afternoon po. Argules Joselito, kaganda ng gustong gawin ng wala pa sa Malacanang, pero nang nandoon nalimutan na kung nagawa niya yan mula noong 1 taon na ngayon. Ayos na sana siguro kahit papano bumaba na ang kilo ng bigas. From Mel B, BBM, magbago ka na. Alam mo kung hanggang kailan ka mananatili sa Malacanang. Hinahamon ka na ng Maharlika Kingdom of God, Lupa, Sug, Empire Federal Government, BBM. Magbago ka na. Ang kalaban mo kalikasan na nadadamay ng taong bayan, may susunod pang baha, bagyo, umiiyak na raw ang langit, sabi. Hanggat hindi umaalis sa pwesto niya, kawawa ang taong bayan dahil kalikasan na ang kalaban ni BBM na dadamay tayo. BJ Wakin, good afternoon, Kaado. The Manila Times and the news item about the Philippines will be open to all as long as it is on a rules basis, which is the American focus. Yung pong rules basis na yan is only in support of America's hegemony. Ang ibig sabihin ng rules basis na yan, yung mga batas lang nila at gusto nilang palabasin. At sabi ng ating kaibigan, no one can really define what rules-based means. Lynn Muta Sarco watching from Bacolod City, Stormy Savi. Dami pong biktima ng typhoon ngayon, lalo na sa Cagayan. Ano na po natulong ng Americans and kabeses sa mga typhoon victim. Sabi ni BBM, isa sa rason bakit sila nandito. Buisit talaga. Wala na po tayong maasahan sa gobyerno. Puro kurap. Only nakuyanan. Ang dami ng padala ngayon. Dapat may batas tayo sa korupsyon, ng kaparusahan, kamatayan. Kaya na di naniniwala dahil hindi na man sila na parurusahan. Tapalan mo na lang ng pera. Mukha ng huwes, okay na. Antayin pa ba nilang mangyari sa Pinas yung nangyari sa Sri Lanka at Afghanistan bago sila gumawa ng tama. Meditate, sleep, and travel. Yeah, geopolitical, blah, blah. Heard it 1,000 times, but we haven't been used to the Philippine advantage. Puro lahat dada. Misanthropy, I hate seeing and hearing kuting. Reminds me how we all been duped by Budol Man. Leonardo B. Ancheta, Mel B. Kung pinagsasabi mo, at sino ka ba para pagsabihan mo ng ganyan ang aming mahal na Pangulo? Ayan, nagalit na yung isa. Inet Garcia, humingi ba si BBM ng advance question, BBM, para memorize yung mga sagot. Kapag ambush interview, utal-utal ho siya. Hindi ho, mga kabansa, puro surprise questions po ang aming inihanda dyan. And in fact, if you would notice, ay trick questions dahil may karugtong sa kung ano pa man ang kanyang sasabihin. Maraming salamat mga kabansa. Nagpapaalam na muli kami dito sa Katipunan Channel. Ang inyong pong programa, ang Maestro, mabibisita ninyo, mapapakinggan ninyo at mapapanood ninyo tuwing Sabado from 3 to 4. At huwag kaligtaan kung kayo po'y bibili ng libro kung saan marami pa kayong matututunan, The Poverty of Power. 20 libro ito because sa likod, The Power of Poverty, ay mag-text lamang kayo sa 0917-336-4366. Mapapaalam na po kami. Maraming salamat muli.